Hey guys, welcome to week one in BU 510. We're going to be talking about this week just sort of an introduction into corporate finance and the time value of money. So, when we talk about corporate finance, a lot of times it actually comes out of accounting. In fact, a lot of the finance departments are housed within the accounting area. Um, the A lot of your CFOs start out as accountants. That's sort of a career progression. I've been a CFO at three places. That's the chief financial officer, and so they run the finance area. But when we talk about finance, um, one of the things that we talk about is the corporate investment and financing decisions that a company may make. So every firm really has to decide where to invest their money, and that process is known as capital budgeting. I mean, I've worked at companies where this capital budgeting process was extremely complex. You would come up with a project and you would take it, you would analyze it, do Carlo simulations, and lots of different economic factors in order to get your IRR and look at your net present value and look at different ways to judge whether the project was good or not. But you really try to get like a hurdle rate and what is this project going to generate in cash. So when I was at Colonial Pipeline, a lot of times, like that was a very capital intensive business. We netted $350 million my last year. We had 800 employees. That is a huge net revenue number per employees. We were the largest gasoline pipeline in the nation, and we ran all the way from Houston all the way to New York. And we had a room with a red phone in the center of it. You had to have special clearance to get in that room, but it was a situation room that went right to the White House. So that is the kind of we delivered 90% of the gasoline from all the way from Houston up the East Coast to New York. And that's a company like that has large pipelines in the ground. We had a 9/11 supply, in case of terrorist attacks. And, just it was a very capital intensive business. And that's really what we did was we had the pipeline, we had the assets, we had the pump stations. That's where your gasoline comes from. Trucks come into uh, the stations and fill up, then take that to the gas stations. So that's how it works. Um, but our big shareholders, where you may have a Texaco or a Chevron or Exxon or all these big gas companies, they have a certain hurdle rate that they want to see you get over, and ours was like 15%. And if you can't show a return on a project that you're looking to invest in, if you're building a facility or making a new pump station or new kind of pump or a motor or something that's going to achieve efficiencies and make at least 15% return, um, they would take their money and put it elsewhere. And so everyone was competing for money. So you had to have these projects that were really good projects. And then when you had the project, you'd make three or four different projects that were kill projects that you investigated, but they weren't as good as the original project. And you could go before a challenge session where the CEO and the COO and the CFO and all these individuals will be in a room and they will hit you with really hard questions as to whether or not your project can survive or not survive. And as they're doing that, um, these basically these are issues that you have to figure out where the investors going to put their money, and that's capital budgeting. So that's one area where we have to figure out how we want to spend that money and how to finance those investments. Should Amazon invest in drone delivery? Should they issue bonds or equity in order to fund it? These are questions you have to ask. So the financial goal of the company is ultimately to maximize shareholder wealth or the stock price. You want to increase it. And as Christians, I mean, we're called to be good stewards and make sure that we, use those resources in a just manner and in the best manner. I mean, you look at the parable of the talents and how, one person just buried their money in the ground and that wasn't good enough, and everything that they had was taken and given to the one who invested more. So we have to do that. And so we also need to look at it from an ethical point of view and figure out how does the short-term gain look at our long-term value and reflect integrity. So all these are questions as you go into the workforce. What are you doing as a company? There's a social responsibility element that you've got to consider as well. There's also company decision making. You're going to evaluate investments using net present value or IRR. We'll talk about those a little later. There's the agency problem. Sometimes managers within a company don't always act in the best shareholder interest. A lot of times managers will do things that help their bonuses, or they commit fraud or something like that. And so that's a situation too, because the shareholders elect the board, and the board elects the CEO, and the CEO hires the managers, and people are motivated for different reasons. And so the shareholders want a return on their investment. They're loaning money to the company. They want that money to go up in value. Other things in corporate finance, you got to figure out, the ownership and control, and how how all that relates. Who are the real people that you're working for, and so sometimes in a company that can be a little confusing because you work for your boss, but your boss works for the shareholders. So this is important. When we get into talking about present values, this is basically the if we're looking like a future value of something, what we're saying is, if we're getting 10% interest rate over 3 years, what's $1,000 worth tomorrow? And so that's like a future value formula. That's something that you're looking at, or you're saying, if something is going to be worth that tomorrow, let's bring it back to the present, and what's that worth today? And so these are all critical decisions that you're looking at when you get into the world of finance. Also, you want to look at perpetuities or annuities. And a perpetuity would be an infinite series of cash flows. And an annuity would be a fixed stream of payments over time. So that's really the differences between those two. So maybe an annuity would be like a 5-year lease at $500 at a 5% annual rate. And then when we talk about looking at interest or compounding methods, we might also want to look at the way that annual, semi-annual, monthly, continuous interest rates compound, and how that over time what your effective annual rate might be, because that effective annual rate is going to matter when you're comparing options. Which is better, 6% compounded monthly or 6.2% annually? So all of that is important when we're getting into this. So Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit. And you need to consider that. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. So consider that in light of time value planning. So this is a good introduction chapter, chapters 1 and 2. If you guys get hung up on any of the concepts, let me know. I'm here to help you. God bless.